So, rolling right off of that tangent about changes in fate and whatever.
Okay, so actually, I have a question that I meant to ask last part, but we didn't, so I'm asking it now. Is Cait Sith in the rest of the game at all?
No.
No.
What the?
Well,
then
well,
why
Reeve is, but
then okay, so then why is Cait Sith in a random cutscene for no
Yeah,
reason?
yeah, that's what I'm talking about earlier. Nobody likes
Actually,
that part.
it's odd because it
Yeah.
feels like the CGI scenes in this game, as a general rule, except maybe for that first one at the very beginning, were directed by someone entirely different from the rest of the team. Because, like, they always have this weird Final Fantasy X-ish plasticky feeling to them that doesn't really gel with the cinematic direction of the in-game cutscenes, and it's odd. But, like, okay, I think one criticism that pretty much everyone who's ever played this game agrees on is that the Cait Sith cameo doesn't work.
It's like he's like, "Oh, I'm too late. I couldn't do anything."
What was he
Grr,
planning
slam
to
the
do?
ground, and then he doesn't appear ever.
Why the
again.
hell is the toy even active at this point?
Yeah, that's...
It's
Because there was reason for it to be active when you encountered him in the Gold's Officer the first time, because Reeve was literally spying on you. What reason does he have to do that in Midgar?
I mean, the only thing I can think of is that he's trying to stop it incognito, but it's like, okay.
He's so far away that he wouldn't have had a prayer of doing that.
it just
Yeah.
kind of was like
Is a super gratuitous cameo.
it just
doesn't-
kind of
it just
seemed
kinda
like,
takes me out of
okay,
it.
here's our
Yeah.
Cait Sith design. Make sure that we show it at some point.
Okay, maybe they'll do something super genius with Cait Sith in the UV episode, and it'll all be explained then. But for now, it doesn't work. Anyway, enemy skill materia. This is where you get it. You get...
And there's a total of 4 in the entire game.
Yeah, one of them
know.
you can't even get until after you beat the
Hard
game
mode.
and you're playing on a hard mode. But yeah, I'm not going to bother with the enemy skill materia during this playthrough because I don't find the skills that you can get from it particularly useful.
It has been neutered hard since the
It's
original
not so
game.
much that it's been neutered, it's that it's been introduced early, and in order to introduce it early, they just introduced a few enemy skills to the game at the very end, and you don't really have enough time to organically get into the idea of using enemy skills, so it all kind of falls apart. If they had introduced it like way earlier, and you had time to collect like upwards of 7 or 8 skills over the course of the game, then that would have been sufficient breathing room for the player to get used to the idea of this materia and what it can do. But here, no. It's one aspect of this game's design that kind of falls on its face. Anyway, this is Leviathan. Leviathan is bullshit. We're not going to beat Leviathan in this part because the moment he uses Tidal Wave, I suffer a full party wipe at near full HP, and
You have to go into this fight prepared, basically.
prepared, and I would also suggest waiting until after the underground lab at the very earliest, because Leviathan is
I mean,
not-
you can do it now, but
Tidal Wave, full party wipe. I need better equipment and a few more levels before I can take care of this. And unlike an original Final Fantasy VII, you can't just like infinitely grind experience points. You can't just infinitely grind experience points. It's a bit like a BioWare game. Enemies are in specific predetermined locations, so there's only so many fights. Well, I guess you can grind a bit in the side quest areas where they give you free reign to loop around the slums and enemies will respawn. But throughout the regular chapters, it's not so much of an issue. It's not so much of an option, rather.
I never felt the need to grind in Final Fantasy VII
Oh,
once.
well,
It's-
yeah. The only reason you're grinding deliberately in Final Fantasy VII Vanilla is because you want to level up your materia and the requirements for that are ridiculous. Or you want to gain your character's limit
Limits.
breaks, and you need to kill X number of weak enemies before they'll get to their next level.
Yeah, that was one design element I never really liked about the original 7. Like, I want to use better limits, but I don't. I'm also getting unnecessarily tougher, and I steamroll through everything afterwards.
Here's the thing about gaining limits. It just counts enemies killed, not so much the strength of the enemy. So if you
Yeah.
want to grind limits but not grind anything else, you can just go to like an earlier area and just fire all everything over and over until
Just
you
mantra missile everything.
Yes, that is definitely an option.
I'm glad that modern day RPGs understand that grinding is not a fun part of the experience, and so most modern day RPGs feeling like let me rephrase that.
Yeah,
feeling like you need to grind is not a fun part of the experience, and so they've made it so that grinding is not necessary. Because I know that MMORPGs exist, so clearly people enjoy grinding in some contexts.
Well, it's more that in the case of MMORPGs, like the fact that things take a while to accomplish, time and effort, it like the satisfaction of building that character up and then taking that character into a multiplayer adventure provides a certain kind of how do I put this? A certain kind of personal sense of achievement that you won't necessarily gain in a single player adventure just by getting your numbers up. Going to like base level Final Fantasy VII, A Realm Reborn, like at endgame, it was 14. Yes, why did I say 7? At endgame, there was this big quest where you had to do all this complicated bullshit to get your legendary equipment, and it like in all technical aspects, it was a hell of a grind. But once you got that weapon, you had that weapon, and you were at endgame, and you had the strongest weapon before the expansion. That feeling, man, that was a feeling.
Not to mention that weapon also carried you through like the first 4 or 5 levels into the new expansion.
Yeah, that too. So you even got some satisfaction out of it if you were an early adopter for Heavensward. So
and now it's a piece of string that doesn't
now it's glamour.
Yes, now it's glamour. Like when I got Heavensward, like for like the first like half of the game, I was just like every time I got new equipment that outdid my legendary stuff, it's like, okay, time to get more glamour fodder. Because I wanted my ninja gear. I wanted that sword and I wanted that armor, and it looked so much better than the stuff that I was getting for Heavensward. So it's just like, I'm just gonna make all my new equipment look like my old legendary gear. Because I've gotten so attached to
Did Fat Chocobo just tell you need to hit the weights? What a piece of shit. What a rude guy.
Wait,
He's not
so
here right
you
now.
said you don't beat Leviathan.
No, I don't. Look at his HP.
Then why
he's
show
barely
this
making a
fight in
dent.
the first place?
Because it didn't actually take that long.
I mean, we've been in this fight for 5 minutes.
I wanted to show Leviathan being an asshole now because I'm not actually sure if I'm going to do this later.
And while you're here, hit that subscribe button, like the video, and ring
I
that
didn't
bell.
even last long enough to get to the really bullshit part where he starts flying around over top of the battlefields. And
Oh, you mean like an actual dragon would?
yeah, but like 2 out of your 3 characters can only attack at close range unless they're using magic.
Oh man, the dragon's acting like a.
Okay,
sorry,
look.
I have a. This is a D&D pet peeve of mine, where whenever you've got a campaign and the dragon, and they're like, okay, you're gonna fight the dragon, and you're outside, and the dragon's standing on the ground, then you hit it with your club or whatever. When in an actual case where the real life dragon would be, he'd be flying around in the sky shooting fireballs.
He would. And I've played Skyrim. That's not fun.
Yeah, so then don't pick a fight with the dragon. You can't win.
Look, you can't not pick a fight with the dragon. It's part of the main quest. You can't avoid it.
Oh, you're telling me playing Skyrim's about doing the main quest, huh?
No, you need to
That's
fight-
what you're telling me,
you
that you
need
play
to-
Skyrim to do the main story.
You
Okay.
need to fight the first. You need to fight the first dragon to unlock the shouts. You can't not fight the first dragon. You have to kill the
Is
first
Leviathan a
dragon.
dragon or a serpent? I think he's more of a snake.
He's a
Leviathan.
long flying thing with scales. It's a dragon.
It's based on the Asian serpentine flying dragon, like Dragon Ball Z kind of.
Shenron, yeah.
Yes. But yeah, that's a water dragon. Pretty basic stuff. But like, yeah, Leviathan utterly wiped me out. We haven't even gotten to Bahamut yet. That's I'm not sure I'm gonna show it. I'm not sure I'm gonna get around to showing him off. But he's certainly a boss fight. Ugh.
So Shinra said that Avalanche did it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That was their entire. That was like one of the things that they added in this version of the sequence of events was the Turks talking about flying around in their helicopter, broadcasting loud messages about how Shinra doesn't negotiate with terrorists, and we all know about your evil plot to blow up the pillar.
It was originally something that was just a line in the original games where
Afterwards, you could watch a news channel in an NPC's house, and they would say that news channel would blame it on Avalanche, but it wasn't.
Well, no, I mean, in the when you first visit Shinra HQ, and you know you're in the ventilation shaft, and you're watching the meeting, and President Shinra to himself says that we'll drop the plate and said Avalanche did it.
I think it was Heidegger who said, "Hey, after all, we're the ones who saved Sector 7 from the evil terrorist organization Avalanche." And Barry was like,
basically.
"You son of a bitch," and that was.
I'm gonna shoot him from.
That
this
was like
vent.
the only mandatory story scene that touched on it because Final Fantasy 7 was running on Final Fantasy pacing.
And even in that scene, I still hear Bender's voice saying that.
Anyway, for the first leg of this area, I was afraid that we were just going to be retreading old territory the whole time, but
Same.
no, part of the area you went through with Aerith got blocked off, so you have to go through a different fork.
Slightly different area.
Yeah, and follow a different path through the Sector 6 slums than you did before.
Are we just trying to get to their HQ and save Aerith?
Right now, we're actually on a detour back to Sector 7 to see if we can find any survivors. So, butterfly effect. Because we got people out, we're going back to check to see whether Wedge or maybe Biggs or Jesse got out.
I know this is something that probably doesn't matter at the end of the day. I always kind of wonder what the limitations of the Whispers were, because I think it's just outright said that there's a lot more survivors of Sector 7 here than there was in the original game, and they were swarming Wedge.
The obvious limitation is that even though they're invisible, they have to physically interact with the world in order to affect the outcome. So they need to physically make defensive football formations around anything that's trying to change, and obviously that's why this isn't working out for them.
Also, it's more than implied. It's kind of just outright stated at the end of the game that people with very strong wills can kind of overpower them if they try hard enough, such as Sephiroth.
Well, yeah, we have a couple of boss fights against the goddamn things where we succeed in semi-succeed in powering their way through. Like right before.
I'm just saying, do all the survivors of Sector 7 have Whispers flowing around them right now?
I think
you're supposed to die.
It's really just for plot critical people such as Wedge and stuff.
Yeah.
Like Joe the coffee shop guy, who probably doesn't matter.
As it's explained later on by either Aerith or Red 13, the Whispers are acting to protect the future that allowed their own existence. Presumably they're some sort of result of the original timeline in a way. They're also born of the planet, so it's implied that it's another weapon situation where the planet made these things, and rather than actually helping the planet, they just wound up being a fucking hindrance.
Whispers are kind of like an entirely different category though, because of how metaphysical they are. You know,
I would laugh so hard though if we get to part 3 and just Necron shows up.
You know, because the weapons were literal sentinels that were made to protect the planet from physical harm.
Yeah, and the irony of the weapons in the original game was that they were sentinels made to protect the planet from physical harm, but they wound up not knowing what to protect the planet from. So so when they woke up, they just became a big fat barrier to your own success in protecting the planet, and it was a headache, but master materia.
Kind of.
But just in general, the Whispers are interesting in that they're obviously a result of fate, and they're there to protect against changes to fate. But they're not all powerful in that respect, so it's a case where destiny is more of an artificial construct.
Can God microwave a burrito so hot that he himself cannot eat it?
I've never heard of that analogy. I get, but that's why I find it so weird because beforehand that was never a thing in Final Fantasy VII.
Well, it's kind of
the idea of destiny and fate. Can you think of it? Can you think of an exception?
It's why I bring up the joke that I just suspect Necron to float in at some point.
It's more like Final Fantasy VII has always flirted with this idea that, like, there are concepts in the Final Fantasy VII world that match archetypal, like, mythological concepts, but when
etc. are basically just one big version.
Yeah,
of that.
like spiritual ideas.
But when they're examined, they're actually like constructs created either by the planet or something out of outer space. So it winds up like being like there are mystical elements in this universe, but they all have some sort of within the universe sensible scientific explanation for how they came about. And that's just been a running theme throughout Final Fantasy VII and the compilation. Sometimes handled well, sometimes handled Dirge of Cerberus poorly. Like Omega Weapon in Dirge of Cerberus was an interesting concept that the planet would have its own Armageddon Sentinel programmed.
Get out of jail free card.
But like Dirge of Cerberus' story was a pile of poo, so it didn't really work.
And yet it's coming back.
Well,
sort of.
Bits and pieces.
if they remade Dirge of Cerberus with modern gameplay conventions and an improved story, that's hopefully like ideally
basically make an entirely different game.
Ideally redo Dirge of Cerberus' story, but have the people who did Final Fantasy VII Remake direct it. Then it could work really well. In fact, it would probably be the best goddamn game in the series if they did that. But
hold on, wait, who directed Dirge of Cerberus though?
I don't know.
Okay, but like, do you need to do that?
No,
or
you don't.
Could just
I don't care
well
what you
alone?
need to do. You know what? I'm just spitballing fantasy concepts here. Okay, let's leave practicality out of it for like the next 5 minutes. Let me dream.
I'm just saying that you could make a good game instead of remaking a bad game.
Or you could remake a good game into, or you could remake a bad game into a good game. I think that would be the most interesting kind of remake, and it's like the one remake that no one ever does.
Yeah, because they want the sure thing of a successful game, and no one wants to remake a failure of a game.
There are a lot of flawed games out there that had mountains of potential, and I would say Dirge of Cerberus is like one of the bigger examples of it. Because in concept, it's a really good idea, you know? But it just didn't work out because it wasn't well done at the time.
Oh, that's interesting. The event director and scenario writer of Dirge of Cerberus was the event planner of the original sub.
Oh.
It was
So
Hiroki Chiba.
he just took his paycheck that day. Okay.
Yeah.
Or you know what? I'm probably not giving him enough credit. It's probably just that he wasn't experienced enough with action games to pull one off. Because that has definitely been a thing that's happened in the games industry, where talented designers have been put on projects that they're just not suited for, and it generally doesn't work out when that happens. But okay, so. As a general rule, the Final Fantasy VII compilation games all have strong concepts behind them.
Yeah, if they want to use the remake universe, because basically what it is, to incorporate compilation elements in an opportunity to make them better, or just good entirely, then sure. I don't see the harm in it. I mean, obviously you could risk them being bad, if not worse, than what they originally were. But I also feel it's worth a shot.
I don't know. I feel like I can't think of any compilation plot elements that people actually liked, aside
Crisis
from Zack getting some proper character development in Crisis Core. That's like
It's not even a matter of Zack getting proper development in Crisis Core. Crisis Core was also a legitimately good game.
I wouldn't say that there aren't elements that people didn't like. People generally like Before Crisis, or a lot of pieces of it. The element that they've already brought into Remake, the fact that Avalanche was a larger group, and that part of that group was a lot less savory than the side that we saw with Barrett and crew. That's a good element. I enjoy that element. I'm glad they brought it back. The other thing that people generally do like, though, is that, you know, while people are a bit divided on Genesis's plot in particular, the idea that there were 3 super soldiers rather than just Sephiroth, that they had this friendship between them that broke and dissolved as the science-y stuff behind them got out of control. That's a generally good area to explore as a narrative rabbit hole. of sorts, you know.
Well, I would disagree that that's necessary in the remake at all for a couple of reasons.
You know what?
One,
You keep
it's-
saying necessary. I did. Why is that worth thinking about? I don't get it.
Like, okay, that's not this universe's Sephiroth, so it's okay. We could learn some background about Sephiroth because that's really the important thing here, right? Like Genesis and other guy whose name I don't know. In this instance, going into their background or whatever would mostly just be there to flesh out Sephiroth as a character. Whereas the Sephiroth is just, that Sephiroth doesn't matter anymore in terms of the story, or it doesn't seem like he matters because this is future Sephiroth that already lost, but is now going back in time.
Here's the interesting thing about that. We didn't see Sephiroth in the original game in terms of like actually existing in, you know, the current situation until after we got left to Midgar.
We saw like 5 minutes of what Sephiroth was like in the past.
Yeah, but we didn't see him in person, quote, you know,
Yeah.
in terms of what's going on until much later in the game.
Yeah.
So you know, that could be a really interesting angle where, you know, what do we do with this timeline Sephiroth if we have a first timeline Sephiroth here?
That's actually another question. Like, is the Sephiroth that we're encountering in Remake the same Sephiroth we're chasing across the world? Or are there two? That would be actually pretty wild.
No, I think things are so radically different now. I think there's just one Sephiroth now. Unless, but you know, Sephiroth would also be the person to have another. He's fucking Doctor Doom. That's what he is.
Hello, Sephiroth, you dashing rogue. Well, hello, Sephiroth, you handsome man.
This would be one of the cases where it would actually be pretty effective to have two iterations of the same character running around, because conceptually at this point Sephiroth in the original game was operating through clone avatars. So it would be a situation where the additional time traveler Sephiroth could hide effectively, and confuse both the player and the party, and
the player, yeah, the player more specifically.
Cloud. You see, I found my best friend.
I don't think that
there's so many of me.
This Sephiroth doesn't feel like super subtle or stealthy to me, because he's plenty happy to show up in front of Cloud and gloat for 15 minutes.
Well, because that's because he's just fucking with Cloud at that point.
he's not showing up in front of Cloud though. Cloud's infected with Genova Juju. He's hallucinating.
Never describe it as that again, please.
He's popping up in Cloud's brain to be like, haha, you suck.
That's the thing. In the original game, Sephiroth always had the power to do that, but he didn't realize Cloud was around until they met on the tanker. So it's he's like, he realizes that he has this spare clone running around that he doesn't have full control of, but once he realizes that, he starts like intentionally taunting Cloud and luring him around and using him to do stuff, and that all came to a head at the Temple of the Ancients, where they actually talked to each other.
I mean, I know that this probably is just an instance where we just disagree on how well the story is being told.
But here's the thing. In this situation where we're talking about a Sephiroth who already knows the stuff going in, it makes sense for him to start dicking with Cloud sooner.
It just, to me, that takes away from because Sephiroth, to me, was a villain that functioned better because of his absence as opposed to his presence. Because
in the original, yes, we're again getting to the whole. We're not faithfully remaking. We're remaking what 7
yeah,
is. Because
but if they're in that case,
hold on. Let me finish. Yeah. Let me finish. Okay, so because the idea is everyone already knows who Sephiroth is. He's one of the most, if not the most famous villain in video games. It's hard to make him mysterious when everyone already knows him.
Even the people who haven't played the game. Yeah.
But to go off of that, then yes, if they are doing something new and remaking them, then judging this Sephiroth on his own merits, I don't feel like he's super effective because he is just Dr. Doom.
You haven't seen him though. You've seen a few early scenes of him, and why couldn't Square have a modicum of restraint? Is just what
bothers me.
I don't know if you've seen anything of Kingdom Hearts. This is pretty restrained for them.
Once Sephiroth becomes a main, once Sephiroth becomes a main entity at the end of this game, again jumping ahead here, that's when the game ends.
But like,
So,
I'm just like, in a way, the game is more sequel than anything.
oh, it's definitely it's definitely a sequel.
So like, when we're talking about Sephiroth as a mystery, I think the mystery that comes with Sephiroth, rather than him as a figure being shrouded in mystery, is that what is his end game now? We knew what his original end game was. Is he going to try that again? Does he have a different idea of where he wants to go now?
In the original game, there was mystery to who he was. In the remake, there is mystery as to what he wants to do. Exactly. And we can argue which one is more effective in both, like, it just in context of storytelling or in the context of 7, but I still feel there is mystery to the character in question. That said, I'm very interested in seeing where they go with it because, as we'll see later in the game, they kind of blow their load with Sephiroth as a physical encounter.
Yeah.
And just the idea of that bothers me, but I'm sure we'll get to that.
Oh no, and yeah, you can definitely make the argument for that, Ted, and I would even agree with you in whatever you would argue for it, but to me, it puts more of a line of sight for future games because you can't have, in my opinion, you can't have every game end with a Sephiroth encounter.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
No.
Otherwise, he's Team Rocket, and that doesn't work.
Yeah, I know.
I like the
It's
idea
Team
of
Rocket.
having recurring Sephiroth encounters, though, because one of the things about the original that I wasn't so happy about in the end is that we never got to fight him, apart from his monster form at the end.
Are you talking about?
I'm talking about human mono a mono sword wielding Sephiroth.
You're not counting the battle in the mine with Cloud, I guess.
No, because that was a cutscene. Even if
Still a battle
even if you
against
didn't
Sephiroth,
do
though.
even if you didn't do anything and you let him whack you like a fool, you would
Yeah.
just automatically counterattack and kill him.
Which I argue is the way you should be winning that fight.
But like,
with a wimpy ass counterattack.
but like, okay, I want we've had teasers in Kingdom Hearts for years of Sephiroth as a badass sword wielding encounter. He was the super boss for 2 games, and in like final mix of 1, and even in the vanilla version of 2, Cloud and Sephiroth square off and get ready to fight. But we never get to play that fight in anything but Dissidia, and Dissidia is not the best.
Ba 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 ba.
I just
experience that.
I don't know. I just thinking about that in terms of any other game. It's just like, okay, so why don't we fight Ganon halfway through the game earlier? It's because it doesn't work.
No, I think it would.
Sometimes fighting the final boss once in the middle of the game actually does work. Sometimes.
Yeah, I think mid-story climactic showdowns with the enemy can, if used effectively, enhance the stakes of your impending final encounter with them.
I would think one of my go-to examples for that is actually 14, Stormblood. Xenos, the main villain of that one. You fight him pretty early on in the expansion start, and he fucking wipes the floor with you.
Well,
now,
there's plenty
we
of games where you fight the bad guy early and he kicks your ass in a cutscene, like a cutscene.
No, but
fight.
in terms of establishing a threat, though,
Almost
like,
every
I feel,
RPG I can think of does that, where you fight the bad guy or the bad guy's minion, and it's a cutscene fight and you lose. Lots of
No, if
RPGs
it's a minion,
do
it
that.
doesn't
I
count.
think my go-to example for this is going to be almost everyone's go-to example for this. Virgil. Okay? It even really fits.
From
because
Bayonetta?
What? No, Virgil. He's, white-haired katana-wielding dude, kind of like Sephiroth, but sounds like a Power Ranger.
Bayonetta's
The
girlfriend.
one voiced by a Power Ranger.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think that anybody would say that Devil May Cry is the height of video game storytelling, though.
Well, no, but like Devil May Cry 3's storytelling and the pacing of that story are legitimately excellent, though. So I think it stands as a good narrative example too, and also a good narrative example of how gameplay and story can combine to create a particular effect in an antagonist in particular.
I know we're past the point of the part ending, but the difference is that game's all about that conflict and and I almost called him Sephiroth. Fuck, Virgil and Dante's relationship and whatnot. Like that's a huge thing. Whereas Sephiroth is mostly absent for most of this game, except for the 3 times he shows up in Cloud's head to be like, "Nah, you suck," and then at the very end, I'd say they're 2 very different situations.
Yeah, but it's clear that they're setting that up for the entire series, and that's going to be our through line here, and that makes sense because that's more or less where the compilation was before this, and it's clear they want to follow that idea, and I'm not opposed to them following that idea as long as they do it well. In my mind, by my measure, at least, I think they have a strong start to that through line here.
I disagree based on what we've seen of Sephiroth so far, but whatever.
Well, I'll just say this. He pulls off the mysterious, taunting trope better in Remake than he did in Advent Children, which is not much of an accomplishment. But
Yeah, those guys, that's a really low bar.
I'm just going to say there have been marked signs of improvement, and I appreciate them. Good job, guys. C+.
C.